Okay, hi everybody, welcome. I'm actually going to do the official introduction in a few minutes. I'm going to leave the stage and come back when we start. We have a lot more people joining us online virtually tonight. But before we begin, I wanted to do something fun for you as an appreciation for you coming here. And I don't want to do it when the people online can see us, so I don't want to get jealous, okay? Good evening, everybody. I'm Gadi, and Hanukkah is my favorite Jewish holiday. And who doesn't like Hanukkah? Don't really have to go to temple. Don't tell the rabbi I said it, but you don't. It's a celebration of a huge miracle, lights, 8 days of presents, chocolate girls, sufganiyot. It's the ultimate Jewish holiday. Miracles and presents aside, it's all about our history, our people, our survival, our community, and our food. Tonight we will be delving into some of Judaism's most critical Hanukkah-related questions. Applesauce or sour cream? Grated or shredded? Thin and crispy or thick and fluffy? I think I know all the answers, but I will let the panel discuss it. Okay, we are honored to have a distinguished panelist that will examine those questions. Before we begin, I would like to thank our caterers, About Latkes, who are downstairs right now frying for all of us. Our expert foodie, our moderator for tonight, a great friend of the Streicker Center, one who does a lot of food activities for us. Please welcome the James Beard Award-nominated food journalist, Gabriela Gershenson.
Hi, everyone.
In the panel.
Okay, on the panel. Thank you, Gadi. And thank you, everyone. It's such a special night because we're in person together for the first time. At least it's my first time being here with you since everything went on Zoom, and it's just such an honor to be here. And I see some familiar faces, so thank you for coming. As Gadi said, we have an esteemed panel tonight talking about the most pressing issues in the Jewish world today. First, let me introduce Jake Cohen, NJB, Nice Jewish Boy, and the New York Times bestselling author of Jew-ish. And Sophie Rand, she is one half of About Latkes, and she and Tara Noble, who is slaving away in front of a hot stove right now, have provided our latkes for the evening. Jeffrey Yaskowitz might be familiar to you. He's been here before, and he is the co-founder of Gefilteria and the co-author of Gefilte Manifesto. And Leah Koenig, also a Streicker Center veteran at this stage, and she has written most recently the Jewish Cookbook. There are gorgeous books on sale tonight. Remember, Hanukkah is coming, and all these lovely people who have a book here this evening can personalize it for you at the end of the conversation. Another reminder, if you have questions, there are question cards that have been handed out, and they will be collected at a certain point during our discussion. For those of you watching from the streaming, we hope you can join us in person one day, but we're so happy to have you. You can also ask questions, and they will be fed to us on stage as well. And I think for housekeeping, that covers it. So I'm just going to put this out here for the panel, because hopefully this will cause some very bitter arguing from the get-go. What makes a good latke?
I mean, crispy, salty, greasy a little bit.
A little greasy.
That's kind of it. Fried potatoes. Can't really go wrong.
I think
Well, you can.
You can't go
You
wrong.
can.
Yeah, yeah.
You can.
People have gone wrong.
People have and they will again.
I think it's pretty simple. I think, I don't think you can really go wrong. Our recipe is probably not your grandmother's latke, and people seem to really like it. So for us, as long as we got those main components, and then obviously we really dressed them up, that was the Lux and Lux latkes, so.
But I also feel like there's different kind of categories of latkes, right?
Yes.
There's the super crispy ones. There's the kind of more cakey, tender-centered ones. There's the hockey pucks. And honestly, I think there's a latke for every taste and a latke for every kind of person. So, you go with the latke you love.
Exactly. No latke shaming. I do believe that like authenticity like really only spans as far as one family. So every family is going to have a different way. I was getting shamed by Jill Zarin from Real Housewives of New York. She was asking me how I make my latkes because she does like a very common thing for so many families is almost where they pre-cook the potatoes, and it's almost like mashed potato patties, and they're delicious, but they're nothing like anything I would serve at my Hanukkah table. But to her, like super crispy grated fried potatoes is just as equally blasphemous. So,
Can we be a little judgmental about the mashed potato patties?
yeah. But the thing that I really like to hit at the core of this whole conversation, it's not necessarily the method or the type, but I do think the one thing I am passionate about is breaking down like the industrial food complex of like people who are just like only latke mix, and that's their family and how they do it. And I think you see the same thing. Jewish food the Nasher just posted an article about like matzo ball soup mix is the best way to make matzo balls, which is like for many people, it's the best way that they'll make matzo balls. But latkes, a lot of these things, it's not like overly difficult to do. So I don't think you need that mix, but I do think there's this level of nostalgia that's kind of ingrained.
Yeah, I mean, it's memory. So if you grew up with the boxed latke mix, I've made, freshly grated, latkes for people, and they prefer the latke mix because that's what they grew up in. That's what home is. That's what family is, and that's what Hanukkah is about. So it's hard. I would say if we're talking potato latkes,
Let's just keep it a potato for now,
Yeah,
just to keep things
for me,
uncomplicated.
For me, no food processor, hand grated. I actually hand shredded. I don't like to grate. I like to shred. I think that's important.
A rebasel.
Do you think there needs to be some knuckle in your latkes? Are you one of those?
That's like that's one of the secret ingredients, right? That doesn't need to be in there, but like I like it better that way. Like fried with enough oil, not baked, and
Not air fried.
and not. But if you need to do that for health reasons, great, that's wonderful. But no, fry it, and if you're not sure you have enough oil, you probably don't have enough oil. So put more oil in, and just be confident in the frying. Just be confident, and it's going to work out. But more oil doesn't necessarily mean there'll be more oil absorbed by your latke.
I will say, latkes are also something that people get really uptight about, and not uptight, scared about. Like there's certain Jewish foods, I think, making challah the first time, making latkes the first time, because there's a lot of emotional resonance to a latke, right?
Yeah.
Like it's this very symbolic food, and maybe your grandmother made the best, maybe your grandmother made the worst, and you want to do something totally different than what she did. But I really like what you're saying about the confidence and just kind of going for it.
Yeah.
And Hanukkah comes every year, and you don't just have to make latkes on Hanukkah, so you can practice, do your thing.
I just want to also say, like the giant hockey puck latkes, like that doesn't work for me.
Yeah. We did have some customers that would say, "Oh, I had this like latke from Fresh Direct yesterday, and it was just a puck, and I can't wait to eat this crispy thing you're about to give me." But what you just said about like making something almost intentionally taste not good, maybe because it reminds you of home, really resonates with me. We did a latke that I wanted to taste like the unsalted boiled potatoes of my childhood. And it was delicious.
But you're not serving us those tonight, I'm
No,
guessing.
tonight. Tonight, the latkes will be properly salted.
So therefore, everyone will be like, it's too salty.
You really can't win. You really can't. There's always going to be someone disappointed. Before we get too deep into the conversation, Sophie, why don't you tell us what's going to be in our little latke goodie bag tonight?
Okay, so we're serving 2 latkes at the end of the event. We'll be serving our classic mitzvah, which is just the classic base with creme fraiche topping and chopped chives on top. And then we'll be serving, I like that sound. That's what I like to call a yummy noise. Hopefully you'll ooh and ah even more after you eat them. And then the second one we'll be serving is called the verklempt. It is made with sweet potato and zucchini, and on top goes this green sauce that we very imaginatively called that green stuff because we couldn't think of another name. It's a sauce that has roasted poblano and tomatillo, parsley, cilantro, garlic, ginger. It's a very flavorful sauce. And then crispy mushroom on top of that. And of course, there is applesauce available if you must. I mean,
Yeah.
I like applesauce
Yeah.
too, but
You
it's
must.
Absolutely.
It's just not the main. I mean, I will say, in some ways, I'm the worst person to ask, like, what is a traditional latke? Because ours were more subversive, I guess you could say, other than the mitzvah.
So that was an applesauce if you must.
I just think that our special toppings are the way to go.
But I know we have an applesauce panel. I was going to save this for later because for some reason people really care applesauce or sour cream. I grew up eating both and cinnamon sugar on top of it, which I realize no one else eats. Does anyone else do cinnamon sugar in this
Very
audience?
Polish.
That's
Very
yeah,
Polish?
Warsaw they used to do that. Like,
Never
All
had
right.
that.
My
Well, thank
family
you
did
for validating it. What's the deal with applesauce versus sour cream, and do you have feelings? Do you want to start, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with applesauce, so that was kind of the main thing. The main kind of takeaway was it had to be very cold, something very cold, because we would take these freshly fried latkes that were burning hot. You have to shove them into the bowl to protect your fingers. My family always did applesauce. I grew up with my great-grandmother still making applesauce, and that was kind of just like a thing in our family. Dairy was never like that big in our household. I don't know, maybe because of calories or whatever, but it was always just applesauce, and that's what you grow up with, and tradition. That's what I do now today. I'll say that I still believe that latkes are best with applesauce, with the exception of all of the toppings. When you have with applesauce, you don't really like add things to it. When sour cream, it's another blank canvas for chives and caviar and all these crazy things that you can really go wild.
Well, I had a very similar childhood experience of homemade applesauce, and like sour cream just never existed in the household anyway, even though I would have loved some.
We had sour cream in the house, but we were an applesauce latke family. I love applesauce on latkes. I feel like often applesauce can be too sweet, but good applesauce for latkes should be balanced. Should have a little bit of a little bit of sour in there. We put some lemon in our apples. It just kind of brings it all together. So I love that. Sometimes I'll double up, but I always regret it. I just want the applesauce experience. The one thing I'll say is the sour cream makes it a complete protein. So if you're looking to make sense of a Hanukkah meal, which makes no sense, sour cream does help with that.
I had no idea. Sorry, I tried to talk really loud because my phone just made a noise, but it's okay. What about you, Leah?
I'll say two things. One, I studied environmental studies in college and thought a lot about sustainability and local food and seasonal food. And so for me, applesauce kind of hits that seasonal note, because when you're thinking about Eastern Europe and it's very cold and it's the winter and all of your kind of storage vegetables are gone, what do you have left? You have potatoes and you have some mealy apples. So what do you make? You make fried potatoes with applesauce. So to me, it just makes sense for applesauce and latkes to go together. And I also have to give a shout out to my mom, Carol. Raise your hand. She makes the best applesauce in the entire world. She uses very red-skinned apples, and she doesn't peel them. And so the sauce has this very rosy color to it, and she adds just the right amount of sugar, and it's velvety, and it's smooth, and it's just the most amazing thing. But I will say I'm actually team both. In recent years, I have started to do a black and white cookie latke, where one side is sour cream and the other side is applesauce. So it looks like a black and white cookie, and to me, that's the perfect latke. Why choose?
And when you made the applesauce, though, did your mother use a food mill?
No, she used a Cuisinart, yeah? Yeah. A food processor. That's what I meant, yeah.
So let's lay down a little context here. It's interesting, Leah, you mentioned the seasonality of latkes and how it really just makes sense in the context of the, Ashkenazi, Jewish, just the culinary heritage of the roots of the dish. But I'd love to lean on you and Jeffrey a little bit to talk about how we got to the potato latke, because Hanukkah was celebrated with food for a long time before potatoes were introduced to Eastern Europe. So maybe, Jeffrey, do you want to start us as early as you can take us? I think you both actually have some anecdotes about the cheese fritter tradition that came maybe the first one that we know about.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. Leah knows a lot about this topic too, so we can riff. I would say, first accounts, actually, Joe Nathan talks about a Hanukkah being celebrated with just like a flour water pancake, which seemed pretty basic. But Hanukkah was strangely associated with cheese and dairy, and something that I did not know growing up, and because it was not in our house at all. And you saw references to this in the 10th century, 11th century, and you saw Italian Jews and Roman Jews and Sicilians and even Spanish Jews making these ricotta cheese latkes. They were pancakes, basically, fried in olive oil or butter. And as you saw this community be expelled from their different cities and homes and move into Eastern Europe, you had to adapt. The traditions adapted to new climates. It was colder, and olive oil wasn't readily available. Butter wasn't as available in the wintertime. And like Leah was saying, it's cold. And what happens around Hanukkah? Well, it's when geese and ducks that are fattened in the fall are slaughtered, and there's schmaltz flowing. And so you can't fry the cheese pancakes in the schmaltz if you're following kosher tradition. So what do? You adapt, and so you saw buckwheat and rye pancakes being made. The buckwheat blini that was an inspiration for you, we can talk about later. But essentially, a buckwheat pancake. That's what was being eaten on Hanukkah. The latke is a Yiddish word, but it has origins from other places, but it's Yiddish. So the latke really became the latke in parts of Eastern Europe. And I've read accounts of fried turnip latkes, and only in Germany in the late 1700s, early 1800s did you see the potato start getting adopted. You saw potato pancakes, not just by Jews, not just in Hanukkah, but as those moved east to Eastern Europe, you saw in the mid-19th century, after a major famine and the potato became king, you saw the potato latke fried in schmaltz, but you also still saw in places like Hungary cheese latkes that still existed. You still saw the rye and buckwheat pancakes. Michael Wex, the Yiddishist historian, he talks about how it's boring to eat potato pancakes every day. So for 8 days, and so people mixed it up. They had different latkes throughout the holidays. And I'll just say that in coming to America, the latke got almost codified as potato. And then the great innovation, American innovation, you have neutral seed and vegetable oils that were readily available and cheap. And you had the food processor, the boxed latke mix. And that's sort of, now we're 21st century, we're seeing a whole new latke story being told. So that's what we're here to do today, I guess.
That's awesome. I would just kind of, to connect back a little bit, it's almost impossible to think of Italian food without tomatoes, right? And it's almost impossible to think of Eastern European, Ashkenazi Jewish food without potatoes. But both of those pieces of produce or items are New World foods, right? Potatoes are from Peru originally. So it wasn't until the time of Columbus or the explorers or whoever that the potato was actually introduced into Europe. And it, like Jeffrey alluded to, it took a while for it to catch on. So when we think about latkes being potato, that's actually fairly modern as far as Jewish food history goes. And I mean, they're also superior to every other latke, let's just be honest. But I really like to think about the fact that the potato didn't arrive until pretty late, and how powerful of a vegetable it was for being a humble little root vegetable, that it became so central to the cuisine so quickly. Potato kugel, potato latkes. I mean, those are the two best Jewish foods ever, so.
Well, it makes me so curious about another component that we're kind of putting in the backseat when in fact it's the point. In talking to each of you in preparation for this panel, something that came up regularly was But the point is the oil, and the point is the fat. And we really get hung up talking about the potatoes and what came before the potatoes and what will go onto the latkes, which we will, trust me, dissect until everyone is sick of it tonight, so don't worry about that. But let's talk a little bit about the fat and the role of the fat in this, this festival. Let's just start from a practical standpoint. Is there a fat that you prefer to cook with when you are making latkes at home?
Neutral. It's whatever I have. I don't think that there really is like a right or wrong. I mean, there's a wrong answer, but I typically go for something like a vegetable oil, or my real favorite now these days is like an avocado or safflower. That's just gonna be super clean and go for it. Again, you can fry it in olive oil if you want, but I'm frying so many latkes at such a high temperature that for those prolonged periods of frying, I don't like to use olive oil. And then past that, it's like, yeah, I think the concept of frying in schmaltz, or even if you can't get that, it's very easy to get like duck fat these days at most grocery stores. I've been a big fan of like supplementing, where I do the majority, I'll do like 3/4 neutral oil and then 1/4 schmaltz, and it adds that flavor without having to hold on to so much schmaltz at all times.
Yeah, I'll echo that. We stuck to grapeseed oil, but primarily because all of our other latkes, the main event is the potato base, or we did explore a lot of other tubers as well, other starches, but so much was going on top of the latke that we just stuck to a neutral oil, and definitely maintaining consistent heat throughout service and all those things just make it, grapeseed oil makes that very easy.
Yeah, I like grapeseed oil and peanut oil and some of those ones when I'm being more inclusive, but goose fat, oh my gosh. Goose schmaltz latkes, if you haven't had it, there is honestly nothing like it. And if you order, sometimes there's a place in Wisconsin that just raises these geese, and you can buy 7 pounds of goose fat.
Yeah,
and
of course.
And I haven't finished it, so I'm never short of goose fat. Yes. So I would say that is the number one. But it's not, again, most of us have vegetarians and vegans in our lives, and loved ones who don't want to eat goose fat latkes. So it's a
Don't tell them.
Yeah.
No. They'll never know.
You gotta tell them, but it's a special occasion thing, but it is something else. Goose is the number one, and duck fat. I would never do a chicken schmaltz latke. That's too greasy. For those who don't know, goose fat, it's not greasy. It's really nice. It's more neutral than you'd expect, but it just enhances the experience.
Well, you and Liz in your book, The Gefilte Manifesto, also have a roasted goose, right? Which I feel is the perfect, dish to accompany a latke. So it just makes sense.
And it's actually a traditional thing, the Hanukkah goose. And I would say, I'll just quickly say, Hanukkah made no sense to me as a person who just always got sick during it. My stomach hurt. I was eating fried pancakes and fried donuts and gelt. And that was the meal. There was nothing else, and I had to do this over and over again for 8 days. And then I learned that turns out there's actually a tradition of a Hanukkah goose, just like a Christmas goose, because that's when the geese would be slaughtered. And so it just was very. It kind of suddenly it made sense, the whole tradition, and you would eat the goose on Shabbat of Hanukkah, and you'd have a full meal, and then you'd fry. We'd cook the goose in apples and onions like they used to do, and then serve those apples and serve the goose with the latkes that fried in the fat, and that is a meal I can get behind.
That's heaven, yeah. I love sunflower oil in particular, because sunflower oil is used a lot in Eastern Europe and Russia and the Ukraine, and so for me it feels like the right contextual oil. I don't really like canola oil. I know a lot of recipes use canola oil for frying, but for me it has a little bit of almost a fishy smell when it gets too hot. So I avoid canola oil and just go for straight sunflower.
I find that too about canola oil, so you're not alone. Yeah. I'll share one hot tip. I mentioned this to you, Jake, earlier, but I was frying cannolis once, and I contacted the person who created the recipe, and I said, what oil should I use? And she said, if you use refined coconut oil, refined deodorized coconut oil, your house will not smell like fried afterwards. and it was true. So, hot tip, if you guys like the fried smell in the house and on your clothes and in your hair, be my guest. But try it out. It's kind of magical. But Jeffrey, back to the goose tradition with the apples and the latkes. It's interesting, that was an aha moment for me also when I discovered that you ate the goose with the latkes and the apples all together as a traditional Hanukkah meal, at a certain time and place. Is that where the applesauce tradition comes from? Is that where the apple was introduced to the latke?
I don't believe so. I've never been able to track down any history of the applesauce latke pairing, but applesauce is it's a condiment. It's used with pierogi. You have it as well. I mean, and not only by Jewish people. So it makes sense that applesauce became the dominant sauce to eat with latkes. If you're cooking it in goose schmaltz, you're not going to use sour cream. So you can thank the cheapness of the neutral flavored oils in America for bringing sour cream back into our lives. But what other you can sprinkle sugar on it, which was commonly done, like you grew up doing, or you could have it with applesauce. And I'm sure there are other sauces and there are other cultures where they've added other things to latkes. But I just think to Leah's point, everything in Jewish food traditions are all about the seasons. Everything has a seasonal reason for it. You got applesauce in your root cellar, or you got apples that need to be made into sauce. That's the time of year. But apples just happen to go really nicely with goose and potatoes.
So Leah, you are the author of a global Jewish cookbook, and you're working on a Roman Jewish cookbook. I would love for you to share with us some of the other fritter traditions, because a lot of people, Jewish people, come from superior cuisines, they would say, to the Ashkenazi food tradition. And there are maybe even tastier Hanukkah fried things out there that are not sufganiyot either. So can you tell us a little bit about those?
Sure. Well, sort of like what you were talking about before, the point of Hanukkah is not latkes, it's oil, right? Because of the miracle of the Hanukkah story, the Maccabees got back into the temple, wanted to rededicate it, found enough oil for one night, and miraculously, as the story goes, it lasted for 8 nights. So that's why we light our menorahs, and it's why we eat things that are fried. So if you live in the Mediterranean or North Africa or anywhere else in the world that's not cold in December, and you have more ingredients at your disposal, your Hanukkah traditions are going to be different and have kind of more going on. Again, latkes for me are top, but so you find things like, there's a lot of donut adjacent foods. There's bimuelos, is a Sephardic fritter that has either a honey syrup or a sugar syrup on it. In Morocco, there's sfenge, which are kind of a rustic donut. That's a traditional Hanukkah dish. In Greece, there's, I don't remember how you say it, lokumades. It's another little fritter. So there's that. And then in parts of Italy, not in Rome where I'm focusing my research, but in other parts of Italy, they fry chicken, which that seems smart, right? Because latkes are not a meal like you were kind of talking about before, so you're actually getting some protein in there. And what else? There's a Sephardic dish called keftes de prasa, which are fried leek fritters.
Oh my God, my mother-in-law was just telling me about this the other week. They're amazing.
Yeah, they're so good. And I mean, there's my book, The Jewish Cookbook, actually has a fritters and savory pastries chapter because there's so many fritters. And not all of them are specific for Hanukkah, but they're all perfect if you want to kind of go there. Jews from India have gulab jamun, which I'm sure many people know. They're these little, they look like donut holes, but they're like milk fritters that then you soak in syrup also. So that's what Jews from some parts of India eat. So there's a whole world of oily flavor out there.
This is making me so hungry. So it's an interesting continuum to sort of follow how the Jewish food traditions express themselves, as we're connected to the seasons and as we get divorced from the seasons like we have in this country with, the way our food is grown and distributed. But it also allows for a great deal of whimsy and creativity. And I would love to talk to Jake and Sophie a little bit, because I think that both of you have really let your imaginations fly when it comes to what can go on a latke and how, few limits there really are. So Jake, you're a very prolific recipe developer, so it didn't take much to find that you've done a French onion soup latke, you've done a raclette latke.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, for example, I think that's like the French onion latke is an example of kind of fighting for representation. I was doing the Today Show making latkes, and I wanted to do something more traditional, or I had a few ideas that kind of made more sense contextually, but they didn't want that. They wanted something big and flashy that's going to kind of get people excited, and if that's what it takes to get latkes on national television, then so be it. But yeah, I think you have a lot of fun with it. I think the imaginative portion of it, my favorite parts are the kind of organic evolution of Jewish food, especially in America, as we continue to kind of really get enveloped not only within wherever communities we settle, but as we marry. I think my favorite variation in my book are saffron latkes, which was something that my husband's aunt started making, because many of them also married Ashkenazi men, and they started making latkes, and they started adding saffron because it tastes just like potato tahdig when you do that, and that's just such a beautiful blending of Ashkenazi and Mizrahi traditions that just also makes perfect sense. And the kind of opportunities for those types of mashups are endless.
Can you tell the audience what potato tahdig is?
Oh, bottom of the pot, crispy rice. But then so the crispy rice, you flip it out, it's very yummy. You can start to see it at some restaurants across the city these days, but typically it's just rice. Tahdig literally means bottom of the pot, that you cook until it scorches and becomes crispy and caramelized and delicious. But sometimes they throw other things too. Potatoes, bread, literally whatever you like, you throw it at the bottom of the pot. Pasta, and potato is one of the best because it's crispy carbs. Same kind of idea of latkes. Crispy potatoes are delicious.
And just curious, what did you pitch you said it was the Today Show?
I wanted to do the saffron latkes.
You wanted to do the saffron?
Yeah, but then like, saffron? That's so expensive and foreign. It's like the craziest thing, but all right.
I would have greenlit the saffron
I
latkes.
know.
For what it's worth.
Next year. One day I'll be big enough in which I just be like, no, this is what we're doing, or I walk.
Yes. So, Sophie, I don't even know where to begin, because you have had such you collaborate with different cooks, people from different backgrounds. I know that you have come up with a whole list of your own of potential latke creations that you have served or would serve, as the Lux Latke caterers / pop-up outfit. So can you regale us with a couple that you feel are really representative of the kind of innovations or explorations that you do?
Sure, yeah. So I think a lot of the inspiration for most of our latkes came from like dishes we really loved or memories that meant something to us, to both me and Tara. One of our permanent menu items was called the Spinocchia, which was actually a name of a place in Italy that she and I spent some time.
That's the farm.
Yes,
yeah.
So,
I have friends who went there.
Okay, yeah. So we spent some time working there in the summertime, and for our midnight snack, there were obviously we're both born and raised in Brooklyn, so there were no bodegas around to get like chips or anything like that. So our late night yummy snack would be like just roasted fried potatoes with tons of rosemary and garlic, and we just dip it in way too much mayo. So that's how the Spinocchia latke was born. And with that one, we kind of started to play with texture. Became really interesting to me because there's only shredded potatoes can get boring after a while, especially if you're trying to use it sort of as a canvas for something else. So for that particular latke, we did like a matchstick cut potato to try to mimic like the fries that we remembered eating so much. And then, yeah, we did a lot of collaborations with guest chefs who were most often just like friends of ours. And like I said, we were both born and raised in Brooklyn. I was raised in Flatbush, so was exposed to a lot of different types of cooking, a lot of Caribbean cooking. We did a latke collaboration with a Haitian friend of mine, Stefan, whose father had come to visit from Haiti and cooked a feast for Stefan's baby. Like, the baby had just been born, and they had this big party and cooked all these dishes. I got to try this Haitian pumpkin soup and fried plantains and a griot, which is a roast pork topping. And so we collaborated with Stefan and this was like kind of another foray into textural adventure. We wanted the latke itself to look like a smashed plantain, so we sliced plantain very, very thinly. We did mix in with like a shredded potato batter to kind of bind it all together, fry, smash, double fry. So it really did look like just like a massive fried plantain. With the griot topping and a Haitian pickle called pickles, which is made of carrot and cabbage and Scotch bonnet and vinegar and clove, like so very heavily spiced. So that was definitely one of my favorites. You're reminding me of another one we did. We had a family friend who was an Iraqi Jew. So growing up, we would go to her for Hanukkah, and she would make a feast and sufganiyot, and I always wanted to just learn some Iraqi Jewish cooking. So we did a boiled potato patty with tons of parsley and other spices, which was topped with like a turmeric, cauliflower, carrot pickle. So a lot of just really like spiced, warm flavors in that one.
That actually just reminded me, there's a really incredible Iraqi Jewish potato fritter that's very kind of, it's got latke vibes, but I really love it. I'm going to butcher it. My husband could probably pronounce it better. It's orok et patata, and it's like mashed potato that's then stuffed with meat and then fried.
That's what it was inspired by. We omitted the meat to make, like, because we did try to always have some vegan or vegetarian option, but it was based off of that one.
That sounds
I could go on and
delightful.
on, but
I know you could. I know. This reminds me, Leah, you have an interesting tradition at home. Your kids don't like latkes, do they?
No, they don't.
Send them back.
My dear, sweet, beautiful children, who are 7 and 2.5, are part of the Selective Eaters Club. The 7-year-old's coming out of it a little bit, but they don't seem to like latkes, and it's really depressing. And they'll get there, I trust. I was also part of the buttered noodle club as a kid, so they'll get there. But because they are good Jews, they do love very briny things. They love pickles, they love olives, they love capers, they love anything sort of in that family. So I have started making fried olives, and which I flour and then put an egg and then panko and then fry them. Sometimes I put a little like smoked paprika in for the ones my husband and I are eating, but God forbid I would put spice into theirs. But they like those. And then I also make fried pickle chips. So I take like a dill pickle chip and same flour, egg, panko. So neither of those are traditional Hanukkah dishes, but to the extent that Jake was saying earlier, like authenticity goes as far as one family's dinner table, like it's become a bit of a Hanukkah tradition for us.
Wait, do they not like tater tots or French fries?
They love French fries. I don't get it. Kids are weird. I don't get it. They love French fries. Tater tots, I don't think I've ever served them. Maybe they would like them, but I don't know. They only come out once a year, so they're like unusual to them. You'd have to ask them.
You're such a great mom, though. Like the array of treats that you're making to appease them.
Well, it is an 8-night holiday, and I don't fry every night of the holiday, as to your point. Like by the 4th or 5th night, we were like having salads and, just kind of detoxing from our indulgence the first couple of nights. But I like to, explore the world of fried foods for Hanukkah.
Yeah. Well, You were saying you don't deep fry every night, but when you do, I would love to hear. We talked about oil, we talked about some cooking tips, and early on you're all very nice. You can't go wrong, et cetera, but you can go wrong. You can end up with not the good kind of greasy, but with the rubbery, oily, not crispy latke, and nobody wants that, right? I mean, that's just kind of a bummer. We all eat it, of course. But what are your guidance, tips for having a crispy, the right kind of greasy latke?
Not too much oil.
We disagree.
Oops.
It's the heat. It's
The
the,
heat,
the pan and the
consistent
heat.
cast
The
iron.
cast iron.
Yeah.
Cast iron. You gotta step away and let it heat up.
Yeah.
Too often people are
Exactly.
just so ready to just dump in the latkes, and then it's just like they sit there in the oil for 3 times as long as they have to, and that's why they get soggy, or they don't stay crispy outside. It has to go in and immediately be sizzling.
It's also peaking, like the lifting,
Yeah.
looking.
I rotate. I rotate the whole time because your stove's always going to have hot spots. Your pan's always
Yeah.
going to have hot
What
spots.
are you-
I'm constantly rotating.
What are you lifting? A splatter screen or a? Oh, do you,
I'm
do you
just-
cover the pan?
No, I'm saying people who
Oh,
they
like
want to
lifting.
check and they keep lifting the
I
latke,
see.
and then and to see if it's browned enough. Wait till it gets crispy on the outside,
Yes.
but don't lift it because then you're just
Yeah.
you basically putting it back in the oil and making it extra greasy.
If you are someone who has a food thermometer, which if you don't, they're like $10 on at a kitchen store, and they're this big, so they fit very easily and are a good thing to have. If you have one, you want your oil to be like between 350, 360. That's kind of the ideal, because when it's that hot, you, as to Jake's point, you sear a protective crust around the food. This is not just latkes, it's anything you're frying. You sear a protective crust around the food so that the oil can't leach in. And if your heat is too low and there's not a protective crust, that's when you get a heavy latke. But the opposite problem is if it's too hot and then you end up with like blackened, like singed outsides and kind of raw insides. So did I say insides twice? Outsides, and you know what I mean. So having that thermometer really helps. But if not, you can just drop a little bit of your mixture in before you get started, and you want it to bubble pretty vigorously, but not explosively, I would say.
So there's the interesting question of potato starch. This is something I've observed at home. I know some of you do it here too, where after you squeeze all the moisture out of the potato mixture, then you drain the water and you rescue that kind of very interesting texture that starch. It's like neither gummy nor dry, but somewhere in between.
It's like if you ever made a cornstarch slurry, Freddie, it's that same kind of feeling. It's weird. Gives
It
you
is.
goosebumps, but yeah.
It is. And then you add it back to the mixture. So is that a universal thing among the 4 of you? Do you save the potato starch and put it back into the potatoes? And does that help with crispiness as well?
When I'm doing that's when you like have a towel and you put your mixture in and you drain it and then you have all this liquid. When I do that method, yes, but I've lately been abandoning that method just because I find it to be a little unnecessary. What I do is just I have my mixture and then I have like a bowl next to my cast iron, and then I just, as I'm shaping a latke, I kind of squeeze it out and squeeze out the liquid, and then I put it in, and it's just
Fascinating.
and it saves so much time. It's so unnecessary. I don't have these dirty towels anymore, and in this way you get, and because even when after you squeeze it, you still have, eventually all the liquid comes out again, so you still have to squeeze it. So this has been my big innovation.
I'm intrigued. I want to try that. I don't know. I think it also comes down to tradition. When I squeeze, you squeeze the potato and the onion first because that is taking out that moisture, but then you get to bind it with the egg, and I use matzo meal, but whatever starch you're using. I do find that you don't technically have to do everything because you could then just adjust the amount of starch you're adding. There are a million and one ways that you can make it work. I just find that if this is once I have a method, it's like I don't need a new method. I don't need a new hack or things. It's like latkes aren't that flashy in the sense of what we're doing. But for the starch trick, I think that if you do squeeze, you have it there, why throw it out? Like, if you're gonna, like, it's wasteful. It's, I would just imagine my mother yelling at me. It's like, oh, it's perfectly good. Don't throw that out.
That's perfectly good starch, Jake.
Perfectly good starch.
We did not squeeze, but also we didn't use eggs to make it available to people that could not eat eggs. And so I guess we needed that extra starch, but also just, doing it in such big batches, that's like an extra step that I guess we couldn't really afford to incorporate. And when I'm just thinking of how they go down, they probably look more liquidy than I would think, than most people would think a latke would look like going down. And like, I think that gave it a certain like lacy crispness that we always looked for around the outside. So we just left it all in there. It did its job.
And it was fine. You still got your crispy latke.
We still get our crispy latkes. I think like when you put it down and you kind of like tease the liquid around it, it sort of gives you like a lacy edge. I don't know if that's actually how it works, but that's how I think it works, and they would come out real crisp.
We do have questions from the audience, but before we get to them, I just, we have this interesting combination of like tradition. There's certain things that we really value that we want to do every year. It's kind of like the people who make the same thing for Thanksgiving every year, as much as the food magazines tell us, you can do this or you can do that. People really just want what they want. So I guess I just want to go down the line here and ask if you'll be trying something new this year for Hanukkah and what it will be, or if you will be doing what you usually do and what that will look like. So why don't we start with you, Leah?
Well, last night I taught a latke making class over Zoom, and we made curried sweet potato latkes, which is a recipe in the Jewish cookbook that I hadn't made probably since I developed it for the book. So those are super delicious and are in my freezer, so that will be new. And I haven't decided which of the like sweet treats we're gonna have, whether it's gonna be sufganiyot, which are a pain in the butt but are really delicious, or sfenj or bimuelos, or one of those. It'll probably be bimuelos because they're the easiest, but we'll do something sweet in there. I haven't figured it out yet.
Yum.
My traditional latke was actually one that I did for my book, which is a root vegetable one with parsnips and turnips and potatoes. And it sort of makes it a little bit lighter than a typical potato latke. I can eat more of them and not feel as bad. Not emotionally, I'm not bad about myself, just like physically, like not as bad. But I've kind of saved my innovation for my applesauce. Every year I kind of been adding new things. The past few years, I still have some smoked plums that I brought back from Poland, which is just like really nice. And I'm running low, so I actually have no ambitions for Hanukkah this year. I've made no plans. And so I'm still waiting to figure out what my applesauce inspiration will be, but I'm going to kind of look to the applesauce.
So I'm going to be completely honest, I hadn't thought about this yet, but as we're talking, I mean, when you ask the question, I know that if I do make latkes, they're not going to be savory, because we actually did not have, we hadn't had a chance yet to do a sweet latke, which I have really wanted to do, like a Lakshan Kugel latke. And as I'm thinking it through while y'all are talking, I apologize to anyone in this room that is a friend or family member of mine, because I keep talking about these Concord grapes, which I'm completely obsessed with. You guys may have gotten them at the farmer's market, and I've been making Concord grape raisins and Concord grape fruit leather and stuff like that. So as I'm thinking out loud, maybe a Lakshan Kugel latke with those Concord grape raisins inside, and maybe like a Japanese sweet potato for the potato.
Wow.
I'll let you know how it goes.
So the latke portion always stays the same. However, what I do love I start to create like different kind of tartine variations. So I typically do like all of the savory things. I got a bunch of smoked salmon. People kind of do their own things. I'm just going to be experimenting with a few sweet combinations that I love, kind of taking the cinnamon sugar route and just pushing it a little further. I'm also getting all my wisdom teeth pulled during Hanukkah, so I won't be doing a ton of eating.
Latke smoothies.
Exactly. I'm just going to put like olive oil and some bananas in the blender and call it a day.
Wow, like latke milkshake, yeah.
Latke milkshake. I have a Sufgani oat collab coming with Fanny Gerson at Fan, which I'm excited about. And donuts, I feel like are soft enough that by like day 2, I could probably like gum a donut.
Can you reveal what
It's
the
a
flavor's
play. I'll be announcing it soon. It's a play on the recipe in my cookbook. So it's, but with like kind of also like playing off of Thanksgiving being so early. So we're doing a cranberry sumac jam, and then it's going to be tossed in the salt and pepper sugar for my book that I really love.
So everyone, that's at Fan Donuts in, is it Clinton Hill?
Clinton Hill,
Yeah.
beautiful stroll through the Hasidic neighborhood on your way. I biked there today, and it's
Collaboration Donuts with Fanny Gerson, who also has been at the Streicker Center, virtually anyway.
Actually, and Fanny is part of the tradition of Mexican latkes, which use mole instead of applesauce or sour cream, or sometimes in addition to applesauce and sour cream.
Wow. And they're probably doing catering, because La Neoyorquina, or El Neoyorquino, is doing catering again. So maybe she'll even be selling them, which would be amazing. I'm going to get to some audience questions now. So you guys, you still with us? All right. Thank you. Yeah, let's give these guys a round of applause before we get to the questions. All right, this is for everybody. What has been your personal biggest Hanukkah cooking or hosting fail?
Oh, I could tell you a really good almost fail. I mean, Tara and I are extremely proud of this moment. Can I do that?
Absolutely.
So we would get these massive jugs of oil, to last us multiple pop-ups. And I can't believe I'm sharing this anecdote. It was our craziest service that we'd ever had. And on the few occasions that we managed to make eye contact with each other, we were like, well, what have we done? We're so behind. We're failures. This is terrible. And at one point, she ran low. Like, we would portion this massive jug of oil into smaller quarts for her to use, because she was always on fry. I was on toppings. And at one point, she was like, Sophie, I'm out of oil. And we had the jug in the trunk of my car across the street. So I ran across the street. I brought the jug into the restaurant. We were completely just like slammed, and we somehow managed to like gather this peaceful wherewithal between the two of us and just stared at each other while we like poured from this jug into a quart, and it could have been a huge mess. And anyway, sorry, that was not the question, but
It's a Hanukkah
we were
miracle.
so
I was like, and there was just enough oil.
Yeah.
we were so proud of ourselves, because we were like, we're looking at each other, and we've known each other for almost 20 years, so we both knew the other one was thinking, we're about to spill this all over the floor of this restaurant, and we have like a line out the door. Success.
Everyone loves a Hanukkah miracle story.
Yeah.
Next question. Can you address the New York Times controversy? A recipe appeared without onions and got quite a lot of backlash. Onions or no?
Was this the Joe Nathan recipe? That was like with the baked one. It was a baked potato, or no? It was.
It was like a roasty.
It
or
was like a rusty hash brown type
Yeah.
situation.
Whose recipe was it?
I believe it was
Jones,
Joe Nathan's recipe. Yeah.
I think, this is my take, I think Joe Nathan can do whatever the heck
Whatever
she
the
wants
hell
at
she
this
wants.
point.
Agree.
Joe Nathan has made a lot of latkes with onions and potatoes and egg, and if she
Yeah.
wants to play around and make a non-onion latke, I am here for it. That's just me.
Well, also, the controversy is that people are upset because of some notion of authenticity of what a latke is, and we just talked about that notion doesn't exist. There's no authentic
Exactly.
latke. So that. First of all, that can't be. Second of all, like if I once posted a picture of latkes that were shredded, and someone said, that's not an authentic latke. An authentic latke needs to be grated, not shredded. And there was a whole Facebook thread of people like with their different notions of what an authentic latke was. And some people said, oh, you have to use a particular blade of your food processor. That's the only way to have an authentic latke. And it was just, it was kind of nuts. And so, especially considering the potato is such a recent innovation. So I would just say, hey, clearly latke is like a vehicle for some kind of Jewish expression. Let's just welcome it.
There you go. That being said, in my household, I use lots of onions. I love the onions.
Of
and
course,
we're
of
not-
course,
we're
of
keeping
course.
it vegan.
Am I gonna make those latkes? Probably not.
Yeah,
But like,
no,
you know,
no. But if that's you,
Joan
okay.
knows from a real latke she can play
She
around.
can do what she wants.
I think
yes.
so.
She's a grown woman. She.
You guys are all so nice tonight. I was looking for some, like,
But the thing is, Joan did it. If it was like the bagel article where it's like, I don't need some Gentile telling me the best bagels are in LA. like that's a different story.
I see. We're keeping it in the family
Exactly.
here. We got to protect our own. Okay, I can't help myself. I thought the New York Times controversy that the audience member brought up, is that someone here? I thought that the controversy that was being brought up was the fact that there was an Instagram post this week about try our matzo ball stew because Hanukkah's almost here.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you saw what I did around Rosh Hashanah. I mean, I think there's a big issue in terms of all the publications and what they're posting or not understanding about the Jewish holidays, and it's like.
I mean, we're matzah meal and potatoes people. It's pretty simple.
It's pretty simple. They have, between everyone on this stage, it's like they have enough archive of content that they can handle every holiday every year.
Yeah, but to their credit, like it's confusing, and you're not. It's just a winter holiday, and you're eating like warm, wintry foods, and it's not only latkes. It's.
I don't even know what this.
I don't even know the story.
I don't know
Yeah,
either.
what
I just
was-
love to just jump on the bandwagon because
Well,
they probably did something wrong.
It's what is it? It's like five Jews, six opinions, or I will fill you in afterwards. From the audience, is latke the main dish or side dish?
Definitely a side dish, definitely. For me, like, latke has to have something saucy along with it, so I love to make it with brisket. I love to make it with, in Modern Jewish Cooking, one of my other books, I have a, kind of similar to the goose, I have a braised chicken with apples, and so the apples kind of cook down and almost become applesauce textured, so I like to pair it with that. And yeah, I mean, if you are going to do... I feel like I could eat 100 latkes and be very full and very satisfied, but not feel like I had a full meal. So for me, it's a side dish.
I reject the premise of the question because what if latkes aren't a meal at all? What if it's this is something I learned in looking back at Eastern European Jewish traditions, is that the meals weren't that frequent, and in Hanukkah there's no feasting tradition. What if it's just a snack? And a lot of Jewish foods were just like in between meal snacks.
Horse
Yeah, exactly. So I would just say, one of my favorite things is like a latke fry. And you go and you have some latkes, you have some things, and then you go and have a proper meal.
I completely agree. It's a nosh. There's no, because it's typically somewhere around the holidays. There's a burden upon the person hosting. It's like, I can fry latkes, create a beautiful spread. Don't expect a full meal. Expect the latkes.
For us, they were obviously like full meals, and I think the premise was like expressing different recipes through a latke. So, but at home, maybe I would have to agree.
I love the mental arithmetic that it takes to just sort of pretend that you didn't eat anything when you ate the latkes, because it's not really a meal and it's not really a side. And then that sort of enables you to it's like the bang bang. Like you eat the latkes and then like whatever else you want afterwards.
Well, that's also why I like a thin latke. I don't want that hockey puck, because then you're so full, and then you can't really have a second meal after, or a meal after.
A meal,
A meal.
because latkes aren't a meal.
Yeah.
We have time for a couple more questions. To your point about the hockey pucks, do you flatten the latke while cooking or just flip? And do you put it on paper towel before serving?
I do it like a smash burger. Big scoop into the pan, space them out, and then I go with the spatula. I always love to use like a fish spat or something with slots so it doesn't stick, and just smash it straight down. Again, I agree. It shouldn't be a really thick hockey puck. My gums can't handle that. I need something thin. I would say I don't know, hefty 1/4 inch.
Are you a fish spatula guy?
I will say that I pretty much exclusively use my fish spatula for latkes.
Same.
I don't.
It's
I
the
don't use it
easiest
for
way to
fish.
get under
I use
them.
it for latkes.
And definitely for paper towels or something to catch a little bit of the oil. Not for long, but they need like a landing place, and then you put them on your serving platter.
Yeah, I only put them on a rack. I don't do
Yeah.
paper towels just because then I just feel like then it reabsorbs the grease. And for me, I had already told you I kind of squished them beforehand just to get the liquid out as one of my little techniques. So I'm not doing the smash. And so I have a flatter latke that goes onto the oil.
Here's an interesting one. What wine goes well with latkes?
Beer.
It's actually, I mean, if you think about it, with like the greasy foods, it typically go really well with sparkling wines. I would do like, again, it really plays into the whole thing. It's not a full meal, it's a snack. You put some aperitifs out, people come, you welcome them with some champagne, they eat some latkes, get the hell out. Like, that's the whole thing.
I go regional. I kind of go with like Austrian wines. Yeah. I like a Gruner or Veltliner kind of situation with my latkes.
Yeah, I was thinking Riesling, but I drink sparkling wine with fried food.
It's also the holidays, so you feel like there's that festive energy. You're coming towards New Year's, so I also really like a prosecco or a cava or something like that.
And do you guys ever do pairings with Lux latkes?
We did not, no. I mean, so often we popped up at bars, and like that was definitely a pandemic opportunity, honestly. Just bars needed food in order to reopen, and a lot of them were not equipped to do so or weren't prepared or didn't want to. So, our customers would order cocktails or whatever they wanted from the bars, and I think we would love to do a special sort of cocktail pairing or something like that, but we haven't done that yet. But I do agree with sparkling or champagne, and the mitzvah, our original latke, kind of came out of the idea of like, I just remember being at a New Year's party and seeing blinis with caviar, and Hanukkah had just passed recently, obviously, so I was just thinking, like, why doesn't the humble latke deserve some caviar? So
I always do. I always.
it
serve
goes really
caviar.
well with champagne.
And then you must have vodka.
There you go. But I do think there's beer goes great with fried potatoes.
I think that's a great festive note to end on. We're going to have some announcement from Gadi about the books and your latkes. And let's give everyone a round of applause. Thank you so much. You guys are a pleasure. Well, I guess maybe I'm making the announcement about the latkes. I believe they will be handed out on your way out. And as far as book purchases goes, Ari?
Okay. If you're going to stay, we're going to do a book signing outside. You could buy books at the front and just make a nice line. And the panelists will be out shortly. Thank you all so much for joining us
Thank
tonight.
you.
Thank you to the panelists. Gabby, thank you so much.